Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet, Chapter 9, Dim Sum, Year 1986. When the weekend rolled around, Henry headed past the old Nippon Con Theater, or what was left of it, his feet crunching bits of broken glass and shattered light bulbs. The colorful marquee that had once lit up the dark streets now was riddled with empty sockets and broken fixtures. The once warm glow, a reflection of how much hope Henry had had as a young boy, sat covered in decades of rust and neglect. Restoration or demolition? Henry didn't know which made more sense. The Nippon Con had been abandoned decades earlier, like the Panama Hotel. But, like the hotel, it had also been bought in recent years and was in the process of being remodeled. Last he'd heard, the once beating cultural heart of Japantown would soon be a bus station. All those years, he'd never been inside, and even though there had been a small reopening party 4 decades later, he couldn't bring himself to go. Stopping to soak it in, he watched the construction workers throwing old lavender-upholstered chairs at a second-story window into the dumpster below. Must be from the balcony, Henry thought. Not much is left. Might be my only time to step past the old ticket window and see that old kabuki theater the way it was. So tempting. But he was almost late to meet Marty at the Sea Fortune restaurant for lunch, and Henry hated to be late. Henry regarded the musty old restaurant as the best in Chinatown. In fact, he'd been coming here for years, going all the way back to his childhood. Although, the first time he came here, it had been a Japanese noodle shop. Since then, it had been through a merry-go-round of Chinese owners. Smart owners. They always kept the kitchen staff, which kept the food consistent. That was the true key to success in life, Henry thought. Consistency. Marty, on the other hand, wasn't crazy about the dim sum there. Too traditional, he'd argue. Too bland. He much preferred the newer establishments, like House of Hong or Top Gun Seafood. Personally, Henry didn't favor those trendy restaurants that broke with tradition and served dim sum to the yuppie bar crowd until way after midnight. Nor did he care for nouveau Eurasian cuisine. Ingredients like smoked salmon or plantains had no place on a dim sum menu, according to Henry's taste buds anyway. As father and son settled into the lumpy, cracked cushions of a bright red Naugahyde booth, Henry flipped open the teapot, sniffing its contents, as though he was sampling some vintage wine. It was old. Nothing but brown, tea-stained water with hardly any aroma. He pushed the whole pot, lid up, to the side and flagged down the ancient serving lady, pushing a cart of steamed dumplings in their general direction. Looking over the sampling of shrimp dumplings, egg tarts, and steamed buns called humbao, Henry pointed and nodded, not even asking what Marty wanted. He knew all of Marty's favorites anyway. "Why do I get the feeling that something new is bothering you?" Marty asked. "The tea." "No, that's just you thinking you're some kind of sommelier of dried leaves in a bag. You've been acting different lately. Something I should know about, Pops?" Henry unwrapped his cheap wooden chopsticks, rolling them together to rub off any splinters. "My son is graduating. Summa cum laude." "Summa cum laude," Marty corrected. "That's what I said. My son is graduating with highest honor." Henry popped a steaming hot shrimp shumai dumpling into his mouth, chewing as he spoke. What could be wrong? "Well, Mom's passed, for starters, and now you're pretty much retired. From your job, from taking care of her. I'm just worried about you. What are you doing to pass the time these days?" Henry offered a pork bow to his son, who took it with his chopsticks and peeled the wax paper off the bottom before taking a large bite. "I just went back down to Bud's. I picked up a little something. I'm getting out," Henry said. To punctuate his statement, he held up the bag from the record store. "See? Conclusive evidence that I'm doing just fine." Henry watched his son unwrap a lotus leaf and eat the gluttonous sticky rice inside. He could tell by the concern in his son's voice that Marty was unconvinced. "I'm heading over to the Panama Hotel. I thought I'd ask if they'd let me look around. They found a lot of old things in the basement. Things from the war years." Marty finished chewing. "Looking for some long-lost jazz record, perhaps?" Henry ducked the question, not wanting to lie to his son, who knew he'd been interested in old jazz recordings from a very young age. But that was about all Marty knew of his father's childhood, though he did know that his father had had a hard time of it as a child. Why? He never asked. It somehow seemed sacred, and Henry rarely shared. In return, his son probably thought he was quite boring. A man who had cared for every detail of his wife's last years, but had no surprises in him. Mr. Reliable, without a bone of rebellion or spontaneity. "I'm looking for something," Henry said. Marty set his chopsticks on the edge of his plate, looking at his father. "Something I should know about?" "Who knows, Pops? Maybe I could help." Henry took a bite out of an egg custard tart, set it down, and pushed his plate away. "If I find something worth sharing, I'll let you know." "Who knows? I might even surprise you." "Wait and see. Wait and see." Marty seemed unconvinced. "Something bothering you? You're the one who looks like he has something on his mind, aside from studying and grades." Henry thought his son was about to say something. Then Marty clammed up. Timing seemed to be everything in Henry's family. There had always seemed to be a right time and a wrong time for discussion between Henry and his own father. Maybe his son felt the same. "He'll deal with it in his own way and in his own time," Ethel had said shortly after she learned she had cancer. "He's your son, but he's not a product of your childhood. It doesn't have to be the same." Ethel had taken Henry out on Green Lake on a boat beneath a sunny August sky to tell him the bad news. "Oh, I'm not leaving any time soon," she'd said, "but if anything, when I go, I hope my passing brings the two of you together." She had never stopped mothering her son, and Henry for that matter, until the treatments began. Then everything got turned around, and seemed to stay that way. Now father and son waited in silence, ignoring the carts of dim sum that rolled by. The awkward moment was interrupted by the crash of plates somewhere in the kitchen, punctuated by men swearing at each other in Chinese and English. There was much to say and ask, but neither Henry nor Marty inched closer to the subject. They just waited for their server, who would soon be bringing more tea and orange slices. Henry quietly hummed the tune of an old song. He didn't know the words anymore, but he'd never forgotten the melody. And the more he hummed, the more he felt like smiling again. Marty, on the other hand, just sighed and kept looking for the waitress.